Tommy Foster had a penchant for late-night internet browsing. Never an evening went by without him delving into the obscure recesses of the web. His curiosity led him to a forbidden website whispered about in hushed tones. Arcane Enigma. Among the myriad of eerie articles, he stumbled upon a comment thread discussing a cursed internet meme. Rumor had it that viewing the image invoked terrible things upon whoever stared at it for a period of time. Skeptical, yet enthralled by the stories, Tommy hesitated before clicking the link. The screen flickered, and a grainy image materialized. It was a weird abstract illustration. It seemed innocent at first, but the longer Tommy gazed into those haunting pixels, icy dread crept through his veins. Days passed and Tommy began to feel a growing sense of unease. It started subtly. He thought he saw lights in his house lightly flicker at random times, and unexplained shadows that seemed to dart just out of sight. But he could not be sure. Was he just imagining things? Though Tommy read a lot about it, he wasn't a huge believer in the supernatural. He just figured his fears were playing tricks with him. One evening, as Tommy sat alone in his dimly lit room, the air felt thick with an oppressive atmosphere. He sat down to watch YouTube when it suddenly began playing static then what looked like distorted images, as the once comforting hum of his computer turned into a cacophony of haunting sound. Then an eerie silence, broken only by a faint whispering that seemed to seep from the speakers. Paralyzed by a mixture of fear and fascination, Tommy's eyes fixated on the screen as a distorted image materialized. The cursed meme, now distorted and contorted, stared back at him with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through his soul. A wave of terror washed over him, suffocating his every rational thought. An unseen force held his attention, as if an invisible hand had locked his eyes in place. As panic set in, his heart pounded in his chest like a frantic drumbeat. He turned off the computer. Terrified, Tommy sought solace in research, desperate to sever the bond with the cursed meme. Night after night, he delved deeper into the origins of the internet curse. He could only find bits of text and pieces of historical documentation, but what he uncovered sent shivers down his spine. The cursed meme originated centuries ago. The image had been born from a book on occult rituals. There was mention of a place in some scriptures, Blackwell Woods. The small village hadn't lasted long. Legend said that a coven of witches had cursed their tormentors, binding their souls into a book. And now, it had somehow made it on the digital world. Each time the meme was viewed, the curse spread like wildfire, ensnaring unwitting victims. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness, the only source of light emanating from the computer screen. Tommy could hear whispers, voices sounding like they were intertwining in a cacophony of torment. In his terror, Tommy caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of his eye. He turned his head slowly, fearing what he might see. And there, for a brief, heart-stopping moment, he locked eyes with a figure. A blood-curdling scream tore through Tommy's throat, but before the sound could fully escape, the figure vanished, leaving behind only a lingering sense of dread. The room returned to its dimly lit state, the whisper subsiding into an eerie silence. Tommy was left trembling, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. He knew then that the cursed meme had awakened something dark and otherworldly within his life. The encounter had only been the beginning, a foreboding warning of the horrors yet to come. Driven by sheer desperation, Tommy discovered a ray of hope, a ritual to pass the curse on to another. It required him to seek out an individual willingly ignorant of the curse's consequences and expose them to the meme. It was an ethically compromising decision, but Tommy realized his survival depended on it. He scoured online forums and chat rooms, clickbaiting the image anywhere he could, in the hope that someone else will be drawn to the evil lure of the unknown. The burden of guilt weighed heavily on his heart, but the terror that had plagued his nights pushed him towards an unbearable choice. Tommy imagined his target, a young man, blissfully unaware of the horrors that awaited him. He thought about the victim hesitating, with their mouse hovering over the send button. Trembling, they would force themselves to click, unleashing the curse's malevolence onto themselves. Days turned into weeks, and Tommy was still plagued by the relentless presence of the cursed image. Sleep was but a distant memory, for whenever he closed his eyes, he was met with vivid visions of the weird drawing. It was an unending loop of torment every night. On one particular night of terrors, Tommy awoke and sat huddled in the corner of his dimly lit room. The atmosphere grew heavy. He looked at his alarm clock. It was 3:20 a.m. The silence was shattered by a slow progressing whisper that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, seeping into Tommy's consciousness. A chill swept through the air, causing the hair on his arms to stand on end. His heartbeat quickened, and a cold sweat coated his trembling body. Then, from the depths of the darkness, he could see someone, a haunting, ethereal glow that pierced through the veil of his fragile sanity. Tommy's breath caught in his throat as the figure emerged, its spectral form drifting closer with insidious grace. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, in ways that defied the laws of nature. Its presence exuded an aura of unbridled despair and searing dread. The room plunged into darkness, save for the faint glimmer of the figure's hollow eyes. Tommy's pulse pounded in his ears, drowning out any irrational thought. Fear coiled around his heart, tightening its grip with each passing moment. The figure inched closer, its unhallowed gaze fixed upon Tommy. Its face, a twisted expression of suffering, seemed to shift and change, morphing into monstrous forms that played on his deepest fears. The air grew thick with an otherworldly stench, a putrid mixture of decay and malevolence. A guttural moan filled the room, emanating from the depths of the figure's distorted form. It reverberated through Tommy's bones, paralyzing him with an overwhelming sense of dread. He tried to move, to escape the clutches of this spectral terror, but his body felt heavy, as if held captive by invisible shackles. The figure drew closer still, its presence suffocating, consuming every inch of Tommy's being. Its eyes, hollow voids of infinite darkness, seemed to devour his soul, stripping away every trace of hope and sanity. Desperation washed over him, his mind teetering on the precipice of madness. Tommy let out a blood-curdling scream, a primal cry that shattered the suffocating silence. But his voice seemed swallowed by the malevolent forces that surrounded him, lost in the void of despair. With a surge of supernatural power, the figure lunged forward, its spectral hands reaching out toward Tommy. His vision blurred as the last thing he saw was the figure's hollow eyes, before everything faded into an emptiness of eternal darkness.